All right, welcome to another exciting episode of the Sopranopreneur. I am your host, Mike Ficara. Once again, enjoying an Omerta cigar. These are amazing. Actually got to reorder. I'm actually starting to run low, so I'm excited about that. Really been enjoying these great cigars. And ironically, I'm heading out this week to Las Vegas for TPE, which is Total Product Expo, a big cigar expo out there in Vegas. So excited about that. So lots to talk about today, though, on the episode. But a couple of things to get away. First of all, thank you to everyone who's listened, subscribed. If you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe to the show. Really appreciate everybody that's done that. Also, very excited on the show notes. If you noticed last episode, I added a few things to some supporters of the show, particularly Mafia Chronicles. Put a link to their Instagram on there, so make sure you guys follow them. Omerta Cigars, obviously put a link to them, and Hardcore Italians as well. And then something I'm doing new this week, you're going to see it on the show notes on the very last page. I put a link to the episode on HBO Max, as well as an episode to the Talking Sopranos with Steve Sciarippa and Michael Imperioli. So I was talking to someone today, like kind of my prep for the show, if you will, is I actually listen to the Talking Sopranos podcast first. Then I actually watch the show and take the show notes that I'm giving you here as well. And then I record the episode. So there's a good amount of research I'm trying to do to kind of, really get a feel for themes in the episode. And the good thing about the Talking Sopranos, and if you haven't listened to it, it's really a great podcast. It really gives a good insight into what happened behind the scenes and the process of the show. They have a lot of the characters on as guests, which we're hoping to have here coming up real soon as well. So looking forward to that. So just a few housekeeping items to get out of the way there. Like I said, if you haven't subscribed to the show, would really appreciate it if you did that. But let's dig into today. Season 1, Episode 4. We are getting into the heart of things here. Meadowlands, right? Great episode. Very pivotal for everybody, really. Tony, Christopher, kind of everybody in the show, as well as Jackie Aprile, who we know what happens to him in this episode. We'll talk about it in a little bit. And on the Talking Sopranos, they actually have him as a guest. So, like I said, make sure you check out Talking Sopranos. Included a link in there to that. But let's dig into Meadowlands. And the key entrepreneurial concept here is in leadership, projecting an image of control and decisiveness is crucial, even when navigating personal struggles and power transitions within an organization. Fumbled on that a little bit, but putting that a little more simply, last episode, I think we saw good leadership. We saw Tony negotiating the deal with Shlomo. We saw him delegating. We saw a lot of good things. This one, I feel like we see a lot of examples of where bad leadership is. And when we think about being entrepreneurs, and one of the reasons this podcast exists is to kind of look at the entrepreneurial lessons. We need to look at not just the good leadership lessons that we learn here, or the good entrepreneurship lessons that we learn from the Sopranos, but also the bad ones. There's a lot of them in there from everybody, from Junior to Tony to Mackenzie, who we're going to meet here, the detective, to even Dr. Melfi herself. There's just a lot of things where everybody now, I think in the first episode, we've seen them very, the first 3 episodes really fine-tuned in their role. Now we start to see some of the cracks in the leadership, the direction, the different things people are doing. I think it's really interesting. So let's go ahead and dig into the episode. We come to one of my favorite things in the show is Tony's dreams. And we're going to see these not as many times as I think I would have liked. I really enjoyed Tony's dreams because I feel like it was such a big dive into his subconscious and what was really going on in his head. I think you got a feel for it. There's a lot of times where we saw him either in Dr. Melfi's office and you kind of had to assume what he was thinking. But in some of these dreams, we've even seen it in the episode where they go to Italy, we get really into Tony's subconscious, which I love. And the dream is basically about him getting caught for going to Dr. Melfi's office. And we know, even though he's seeing a therapist, the only person who really knows is Carmela. And Carmela even doesn't know the whole truth, which we're going to see that's going to become a problem a little bit later on, in that Dr. Melfi is a woman. She thinks that Dr. Melfi is a man. So we haven't really even delved into that thing. There's a secrecy there with someone who's, technically the most important woman in his life, Carmela. And then there is the secret that nobody in his crew, nobody in his business organization knows that he's going, because he thinks if they do find out, it could result in him, getting whacked or different things like that. Which once again, we're going to see that play out in later episodes as well, if you watch the series. And in this dream sequence, we know that kind of there's various different things that happen. He sees his family, he sees his friends. There's various different sequences, and this really sets the stage for Jackie's dying. And we talked about the anger, denial, and acceptance in the previous episode. This comes with the acceptance of Tony that Jackie's going to be passing away, and really that he's in therapy because of his mom. The dream actually ends with him waking up with him saying, "Dr. Melfi, what are you doing to me?" It looks like Dr. Melfi has her back to him, and when the chair turns around, it's actually his mother dressed as Dr. Melfi, and that's really the whole reason he's in therapy. Even Carmela said that when they were out to dinner, and he confessed that he was going to therapy was because of Dr. Melfi. So, and obviously here too, I mean, I don't, we touched on this a little bit in the first episode here on Sopranopreneur, but the idea too that, everybody needs help. Everybody needs a coach. Everybody needs guidance. We talked about Tony's team, right? Dr. Melfi, Hesh is a big sort of mentor to him, and Jackie Aprile is a big mentor and advisor to him as well. And we see too, a lot of successful entrepreneurs, a lot of things I've seen, they go to therapy. And I think therapy is a big part of that. And we see how it's become a big part of who Tony is. Another big theme of this, and we kind of start with secrets, and the secrets are almost haunting Tony. And he wakes up and he comes home. He wakes up from the dream. He's actually at his girlfriend's house, not with his wife, but he's with his gumad. And he comes home and AJ's still up. It's we assume it's late at night because if he'd fallen asleep there, and he says to AJ, "What are you still doing up?" And he says, "I'm playing Mario Kart." And he says to Tony, "Well, what are you doing coming in so late?" And he lies to AJ, right? So we see these lies kind of haunt Tony, and we're going to see sort of lies and deceit, how it haunts Tony throughout this episode. I think especially in business too, when we talk about lies, and this goes back to one of my things that I talk about in my book, like Socks on a Rooster, the fake it till you make it philosophy, right? Tony's kind of in a lot of these situations faking it until he makes it. And the real problem with that is that eventually you have to show something for these lies, right? You have to show the truth, and they're eventually going to come up. We're going to see this happen with Dr. Melfi. We're going to see this happen with Tony's crew. We're going to see it happen with his mom. We're going to see it happen with Carmela. We're going to see it most importantly happen with AJ, right? So everyone that Tony lies to, the truth eventually comes out. So even in business, if you're faking it till you make it, eventually the truth comes out. So you either have to deliver on what you're faking or just be honest about who you are up front. And we talked about this a little bit in the Tony Shlomo thing in the previous episode about the negotiation of kind of being a downplaying who you are and certain things like that. So there's tactics that you can use. But really when you kind of look at it, you got to be real kind of careful there. I know Tim Story, one of my favorite coaches and motivational speakers, I heard him giving a talk one day, and he says he's very selective about who he communicates things with. He does a lot of work with celebrities and coaching celebrities and things like that. He goes, and some people that I know are in my corner, when they ask me how are things going, he'll kind of downplay, yeah, it's going good. I'm day to day, working hard, which is true, not a lie. Once again, he's not faking until he makes it, because he knows if he tells them the good things, maybe they throw him against him, or they don't really engage the proper way. But people that he does like, he tells them, I'm working on something with this celebrity or that celebrity. He does engage with the people that he's there. So truth is kind of important. We see Tony too. He really wants to bond with AJ, and he sits down and kind of plays the video game with him. And we see this desire Tony has to make sure AJ has a better life. And once again, a theme that's going to continue throughout the show here. Then we cut to Chris getting out of the hospital. If you remember in the final scene of the last episode, not the final scene, but towards the end of the episode, obviously Brendan gets killed. Christopher gets dragged out to the Meadowlands, and that's kind of the reason why they're calling this the name of the episode is Meadowlands, and it's kind of a mock execution. And he's coming out of the hospital. He kind of got beat up. He's got a neck brace on. Adriana's getting him, and Chris is coming out of the hospital scared. He doesn't know who beat him up. You don't know why he got beat up. He didn't know what happened. But he's scared. He's really scared of kind of what's going on, and more importantly, he's scared of what could happen to him. He thinks this is all tied though to him giving crystal meth to Meadow, and so does his girlfriend Adriana. Like, you gave the boss of the family, or the boss of your crew currently, you give his daughter drugs. What do you expect? Of course, you're going to get your ass kicked. He doesn't actually at this point. Chris doesn't even realize that it's Junior that did this, so he's still trying to piece things together and see what's happening and see what's going on there. And then obviously, the story kind of unravels a little bit more. We're going to see this sort of play out. He goes to Brendan's apartment and he finds him dead there. Adriana actually finds him first. He goes in to go score drugs there. Chris obviously has a big drug problem, big dependency. And we talk about Chris. Chris is a fake it till you make it kind of guy. And we're going to see this we're going on. And that's obviously why he kind of turns to a lot of these things. Drugs. We see the different things that he sort of does to cope with this, and not really being able to be a leader and kind of step into the leadership role that he desires. Next, we get to AJ. And remember what I said about sort of the truth always comes out eventually, right? So Tony kind of downplaying where he was to AJ. AJ beeping his friends something stupid, which I think beepers, if you don't know what beepers are, I mean, growing up in the 90s, late 90s, that was a thing, man. Everybody had a beeper. So he's beeping his friend something stupid. And the kid knows it's AJ. AJ's playing dumb like you don't know who this is, and they basically are going to get into a fight. And this is a pivotal scene in the show because this leads to AJ discovering who his father is as we go throughout the episode. It also goes to show, too, reputation. And we talked about this a lot in business. Your reputation matters. But more importantly, Chris's reputation. Chris is going to talk about his reputation depending on what Tony does. And AJ's reputation as his son is going to be dependent on what Tony does as well. So your actions don't just affect, and especially when you're in a leadership position, you have a role, the things you do ethically and unethically, right and wrong, have an impact not just on you and your life, but on the people around you, your employees. They have an impact on your family. And that's something that's really important to remember. We're going to see that concept really start to unfold here. And you'll see too, if you look at the key entrepreneurial message on the show notes, it really speaks to that idea of leadership and the impact it has on both our authority within our family and with our associates. We're going to see where that sort of develops and sort of goes there. And once again, we see sort of, and this is the brilliance of the show, right? David Chase and the writing that he did on the program. We see Tony going to Dr. Melfi's office after having this dream, right? So we assume it's the next day or a few days later. And as he's walking down the hall, Silvio's walking out of the dentist office of this medical complex. Tony freaks out, doesn't know what to do, randomly jumps into some doctor's office. And when he goes in there, obviously this is kind of like his dream coming true, and he's nervous about getting caught, and it's frustrating. In the therapy session, he tells Dr. Murphy, "Look, I'm having second thoughts about this. Someone saw me that I'm lying to. I almost got caught lying. Right? All this lying that Tony's doing is kind of catching up with him. Being in therapy could affect his reputation. He's got a reputation of being strong and tough and having it all together. And this going to therapy could maybe make him seem weak. He feels like." And Dr. Malfi says something, kind of kidding around, because Tony says to her, "Hey, who are you, by the way?" And once again, this is going to start to develop into a key concept we see throughout the episode. And, Tony kind of wants to know how she is, and she says she wants to plead the fifth, and they kind of have a good laugh about it. But this is true in any business relationship. I don't care whether it's a therapist, a contractor putting the roof on, your waiter or waitress at a restaurant, your doctor, your lawyer, whoever it may be. It doesn't matter what the job is. When you think about it, we enjoy things more and we trust people more when we know, like, and trust them, right? And you've heard this, if you're an entrepreneur, you've heard this over and over again. People do business with people they know, like, and trust. In any relationship, it just makes things better. If you go to a restaurant a lot and you get to know the owner, or you get to know a certain waiter and they wait on your table all the time, you develop a relationship with them, makes the dining experience better. It even makes the food taste better, right? If you have a therapist or someone you go into therapy for, or a coach, you should be developing a relationship or friendship with them, because you're going to get to know that better. Same is true of our employees as well, right? If we put the effort into it and we get to know them. So why Dr. Melfi's hiding some things here, maybe her revealing some stuff about herself is going to make the relationship better, but she's very hesitant to do that. Now, keep this in mind, though, because we're going to see later on in the episode, she does start to open up with him, and how it changes the role and flips things. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Moving on to Chris is still unsure of what's going on, right? He got his ass kicked. He left the hospital. He still doesn't know who hurt him. He went to Brendan's house, and Brendan's dead. He doesn't know who did that. And he goes to pick up Meadow, because he's like, okay, I got to figure out if this is all, coming from this situation, which is kind of smart on his part. So he goes to pick up Meadow from school. She doesn't know what's going on. She thinks it's something that happens with her dad. Adriana is basically the one greeting her, pulls her into the car, and Chris says, "What'd you do? Did you yell at your dad?" You can tell Chris is all over. You can tell he's on something too. He didn't get drugs from Brendan, or maybe he did when he was in his apartment. We didn't see that in the show or on the camera, but he's obviously high on some sort of drugs. He's all over the place. He's freaking out. He doesn't know what happened, and he's basically harassing Meadow, like, "What did you do? What did you do?" And if you look at this from a leadership position, this is why Chris is a bad leader. Let's say Meadow is one of his employees. Something went wrong. He's not handling it calmly until he finds out that the problem isn't the problem. Then he gets calm and tries to unravel things. But you can see on Meadow's face the relationship's always damaged, already damaged. And I think it's important too with relationships. You got to be careful, because she says something in the car that I think is very interesting. She says she hates her dad, she hates her life, she hates everything he has. And Chris is like, "Oh no, you shouldn't say that. It's blasphemous." I mean, the things we do have an impact. And Chris is kind of like, if you would look at it from a hierarchy standpoint, it's Tony, the boss. Chris is an employee. And, you see Chris now interfering with Tony's family and the relations. I mean, the things you do really do have a big impact on everybody. So it's really important character-wise that we look at that. And I think this is a big character episode. And like I said, in entrepreneurship, your character is so important, who you are and what you do, even if you're starting out early. Like I said, it's the reason why I don't like things where we sometimes try to appear bigger than we really are, or try to overpromise and underdeliver. I mean, it really is something where you have to kind of have this consistency, and we see what Chris does with that. We cut back to, and this goes back to the thing with character and reputation is, and we talked about Tony in the relationship as his mom, and I've always kind of pulled the parallel in business of this as trying to prove your haters wrong, right? And Tony's mom really is a hater, right? And she's a negative person. She's not even doubting him to keep him safe. Some people, I think, question, especially in entrepreneurship, right? I think your family, even your parents, or maybe it's a spouse or a brother or sister or someone close, you may question what you're doing in the entrepreneurial realm, not out of doubting who you are and what you could do, but just out of caring for you, right? But Tony's mom does not care for him. This is a pure hater situation. And he, once again, is trying to make her happy. And we can see, too, there's a couple of parallels here on how do we achieve this level of happiness. Tony is trying to put all this effort into his mom, puts her into a really nice nursing home, visits her regularly, and he's not getting out of it what he should. And Tony's mom as well, she's not happy with the situation she's in. She's in this gorgeous nursing home and she's miserable. And Tony says, "You're not putting in the effort. You're not putting in the effort." And a key line here, I think anything in life that we do, If you're not putting in the effort, you are not going to be able to find the happiness of it. Happiness does not happen through osmosis, right? It happens through hard work. And then you get to enjoy the happiness. I think a lot of time we want happiness to just come to us by luck. Does it happen sometimes in life? Sure. There's dumb situations that we just stumble into and all of a sudden we get lucky and we're happy. But in this particular situation, I don't think that that's there. And I don't think we really see that. And Tony with his mom, obviously there's nothing you do to make her happy. So I don't know why he keeps trying. So that's my thing too, is like, you're never going to make your haters happy. So why try to make them happy? And I know the cliche of like, well, the success and, I just want to thank them for motivating me to be able to do things. That works for you, great. But, if you focus on the haters, though, that's not the good thing. The key is to ignore the haters, let them keep doing their own thing, and you go and be successful, and you do what makes you happy. Uh, Next, we cut to the scene where Tony and Detective Makazian, who is basically a corrupt cop that has a gambling debt to Tony and owes Tony money. We see him; he's actually outside the nursing home. Played by amazing actor, the same guy who played the dad in Home Alone, which I was just in Chicago, going down the airport there. Always reminds me of the Home Alone scene. And he's in debt. Things aren't well. He owes Tony money, so Tony's going to ask him for a favor, right? And this is important too, I think, in business where we got to look at who we develop relationships with. Obviously, Tony has this guy, and he's able to leverage him, and Tony's able to get what he wants. But this guy here, Makazian, the detective, he went into debt with Tony for gambling and all these things, and now he's kind of over leveraged by Tony, same way Shlomo was, right? So it's really, you got to be careful who you go into business with. This is true, and this isn't just because it's a mob thing. I just, we can't just say, oh well, yeah, but if you don't get involved with criminals, you can't get over leverage. There's plenty of people in the business world that are doing good things or the right things. They over leverage themselves, or they over leverage a partnership, and it hurts their business. So it's really important to look at who are we getting into business relationship with. And Tony knows that, hey, I can leverage sort of Mackenzian's skills, which is now from a good managerial standpoint. Tony's looking at like, hey, who do I have in my network that I can leverage? Because he does want to know more about Dr. Melfi, right? And he wants to know more about her. So he's going to have this detective sort of look into her. And he says, you don't need to know, why. I just need you to look into this and dig into this, because he really wants to know. He wants to know, like, and trust Dr. Melfi, right? And because Dr. Melfi's not giving that window, he's going another way to find out more about her so he could actually know, like, and trust her and go deeper in therapy. And I think that's the thing here. If he really didn't want to do therapy anymore, he would just left. He wants to grow. He realizes this therapy is helping him, but he doesn't want to go in on this. He doesn't want to get caught with his pants down, for lack of a better term, until he knows, likes, and trusts Dr. Melfi. In order to do that, he's got to hire basically a private detective to do that. Next scene, we cut to the hospital. We see Jackie in the hospital. He's getting worse. Things are not getting better with him. He's obviously declining. And Tony, we can see once again why he's accepted it. And we talked about the anger, denial, acceptance in the previous episode about Jackie's death. And the stages that he went through with that. Obviously, Dr. Melfi was a big help with that as well. He is now there and just not dealing well with that. He's accepted it, but he's in sort of this acceptance and also anger, a little bit of anger as well. So he's kind of going back through the stages again, if you will. And we're going to see that too throughout here. We're obviously not focusing on it, but he's kind of angry again. Then he has the denial, and then he just kind of has to accept that he passed. Tony really can't deal with it, and Chris comes in because now that he realizes it's not Tony who did this to him, he's pretty sure it was Junior who did it as revenge for stealing the truck. And he's pretty sure that that's why this has happened. So Chris comes in to Jackie's basically deathbed, who once again is Tony's mentor, right? Someone who's really important in Tony's life. And he says, hey, look, Brendan's dead. And he's like, what do you mean? What happened? Where have you been? What went wrong? And Chris tells him the whole story. And Chris really wants to go out and take care of this. He's going there not to tell Tony, to basically have Tony help him, and tell Tony, I'm pissed. You're the boss of the family. I represent you out there. I represent you out on the street, which that's going to come up again later on. And he's basically saying, I'm going to go seek revenge against Junior and Mikey Palmisi, because he knows Mikey Palmisi did the hit. And Tony's like, you're not going to do anything. You're going to stay right here. And he tells Silvio if he leaves, break his other neck, which is kind of funny. He says, I'm going to take care of it. And then as he leaves to seek this revenge, he grabs a staple gun. Now, keep in mind, too, we know with Jackie dying, Jackie Aprile is the leader of this organization. And Tony are basically the number one and number two. Tony and Junior, I'm sorry, are the number one and number two sort of up for Jackie's seat, right? They're up to take over the family. No one really wants it, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but there's obviously this power struggle, right, between Tony and Uncle Junior. But there's also a family relationship there. Tony talks about this in later episodes as well, how much he looks up to Uncle Junior. He talks about it at the end of this episode, how much he looks up to him. So he goes to Junior, and really, basically, this is the confrontation. So he sees Mikey Palmisi out there. Mikey doesn't know that Tony knows what happened. And he basically tells Mikey, "Hey, how you doing?" Basically says a few wise lines to him. Mikey steps out of the car because he thinks he's going to say to him. Tony just beats the crap out of him. He just literally goes off on him, and beats him with a stapler, the staple gun that he got at the hospital, and then he had a ticket on his car. He staples it to his chest and just basically beats him till he's unconscious. Because this is really a message and sort of a revenge for what happened to Brendan and what happened to Chris. Tony's got to avenge them because they're in his crew, and if he doesn't do that, it basically would show weakness, and Tony doesn't want to show that level of weakness. So Tony then heads in to talk to Uncle Junior, and Uncle Junior's kind of making some jokes, and Tony and Junior discuss their disagreements. And this is once again where these guys are both leaders, so you got to think about it too. They're people that work underneath them are looking towards them for the example. What example are you going to set? And Tony's trying to tell Junior, hey, listen, like everyone's looking at us. We're the guys, like we're the leaders of the we're up next. Jackie's on his deathbed. People are looking for us for what next, what's the stability of this family, how are we going to do these things, how are we going to do things right, and we're acting like fools, right? We're acting like ridiculous. How do we stop this? And Junior is basically trying to overthrow Tony here and be more powerful, right? He's talking down to him, he's making jokes, he's not taking what he's saying seriously, which at the end of the day, once again, we talked about this being sort of an example of bad leadership. Is not good leadership. Even if Junior really did want to be the leader, is this really the way you treat things? He even said, well, now Christopher works for me. Maybe he gives you headaches every once in a while. He's trying to, if you're going to make me feel pain, I'm going to make you feel pain, which is not a good managerial style, right? And we know Tony's a really good negotiator. And we're going to see this. We saw it in the Shlomo episode. We're going to see it again. And we even see it with Junior. He's trying to kind of downplay things and kind of be there. But Junior just is not having it. Poor leadership on Junior's part. Poor recognition of what needs to be done. And really, it's a bad example of leadership kind of from both of them, though. Tony, obviously, what he did to Mikey is not a good way to set the stage. I don't think Junior knows about it yet, but it's really not going to make things any better. And Junior, kind of the way he treats Tony, kind of talking to him like he's a kid, And even when Tony leaves, he says, "Listen, don't come to me with your stuff." Which once again, a bad leadership thing, right? Your door should technically always be open as a leader. And he said, if you're going to come in again, come in heavy. Meaning, if you're going to come in, you might as well kill me. You want the throne, you got to kill me. If not, get out of here and stop talking everything you're talking. So he really lays down a gauntlet here. Junior lays down a gauntlet of like, listen, Tony, like I don't care. I don't respect you. And more importantly, I'm going to do whatever I want, which is once again, just a terrible, terrible form of leadership, which leads us to the next thing. We see Detective Mackenzie sort of doing what Tony directed him to do. He's following Dr. Melfi. She's out on a date with somebody. We see her kind of joking around in the car with her date. They're laughing. They're having a good time. And Mackenzie is obviously the lead detective, and he's got his underling in the car with him. And his underling is like, hey, like, why are we doing this? Why are we following these people? Why are we doing this? And he basically, much like Tony lied to AJ in the beginning, we see sort of these strings of lies going on, right? Meadow and Christopher, AJ and Tony, Tony and Carmela, Melfi and Tony. I mean, everybody's just lying to each other and nothing good is coming out of it, right? This is where I feel like the lies are coming to a head. And this is why transparency is so important, I think, in any organization. The less the more things we hide or we don't tell people or we're like, I don't know if we need to talk about this. Transparency is key, man. Transparency is key in any business, in any business relationship. And if you're lying, it's all going to come to a head. And what we see here is the lies that Junior's, lies or even disclosure, right? Junior didn't tell Tony that he was going to go whack Brendan, but he still did it, right? And he didn't tell him that he was going to be the crap out of Christopher, but he still did it. So lies or deceit or hiding things, that's why in business, transparency is so important. And when you're transparent in your business, that is when you are successful. When you are transparent and you're clear about who you are, that is when you're successful. When you're not playing the fake it till you make it mentality, that is when you're successful. And we're going to see in the end, Tony ultimately gets what he wants and Junior gets what he wants, but not because Junior was transparent, but because Tony's transparent. So it's really important to remember that. So Mackenzie's in the car and they're following Dr. Melfi, and he's basically pulls her and his date over. And once again, much like Tony beat the crap out of Mikey Palmisi, Detective Mackenzie beats the crap out of Dr. Melfi's date, right? And Mackenzie thinks he's doing something good here. He thinks he's doing Tony a solid, right? Hey, here's maybe he thinks it's one of his girlfriends or one of his gumads, and he thinks that he's helping him out, and that's why he beats the crap out of him. So he does this, arrests him. Dr. Melfi's shooken up. She's scared. She's going crazy, and Mackenzie even goes to Dr. Melfi and says, hey, why would you go out for a hamburger when you got prime rib at home, right? So he thinks he's doing something here. Even Mackenzie's partner knows that this is a bad move, and he tells him, hey, what are you doing? You got to calm down. But once again, Mackenzie knows he's in an authority position as a cop. He's in an authority position with the junior detective that's with him, and he's not really showing good leadership skills here. But we know he's not a good guy. He's a degenerate gambler. He really doesn't have his things together. So that's why there's the problem. So the next thing we see is we know Jackie's kind of on his deathbed. Tony has had this confrontation with Uncle Junior. We know things aren't going right there. And now we see that, Tony's and all the other captains, right? Which they're all kind of on Tony's level. They're all the captains, but Tony's kind of like the captain of the captains, captain of the capos. And Junior's also on that same level as well, but he kind of has his own crew. And they're all sitting there saying, well, what are we going to do? We know if Jackie dies, Junior wants the main seat, but we don't think it should be Junior because none of us have faith in him as a leader. We don't think he's stable. We don't think he's able to see the future of where this business is going. We don't think he's going in the right direction. So everybody really wants, and they're all saying it but not saying it, and they eventually come out and say it. They want Tony, right? And Tony knows it needs to be him, but he's even downplaying it. Well, I don't know. Maybe it should be Raymond. Maybe she's suggesting everybody else at the table except for himself, and he's waiting for all of them to say, no, Tony, it should be you. And if you think about it, this is something Tony's probably wanted all along. But if he goes in there and says, I'm taking it, there may be some animosity between these guys. He has to test out his employees a little bit too and say, are you guys behind me? Is this what you really want? Do you want me to lead you? So Tony's doing this the smart way, where Junior's kind of doing it through force and power and bravado moves. Tony's doing it in a way that he also wants it, maybe not for the right reasons, but he still wants the leadership position. And he's getting everyone else's approval around him, making sure that it's a smart idea, making sure that everybody thinks it does well. And once again, everyone's sitting there, they're eating lobster, they're in the strip club, they're drinking, they're smoking cigars. I don't know if Tony provided all these for them, but I think Tony's setting the stage very well to make sure these guys are happy. He knows if his guys are just happy enough, that they'll get what they want, where Junior is not trying to make people happy. He says that they're angry or fearful of him, then maybe they'll get what they want. So two very different leadership styles there, which I think are really interesting. Cut to the next scene where AJ is going to get in the fight at the school. And AJ gets in another fight with the same kid that he beat. So this is the second fight that these two kids have had. And AJ's obviously got a little bit of that scrappiness, not like his dad. He kind of reminds a little bit more of Uncle Junior, where it's just kind of sporadic violence, no real reason for it. They kind of get angry, and they basically, AJ challenges the kid to a fight. He says, all right, I'll go ahead and fight you. We'll meet this day at the baseball field at 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock, also a big theme in the show. We don't know why, but it is a big theme of the show. One of the thing is too that with that fight, then we cut to the next scene where Tony's at the nursery trying to get some, DDT and some supplies for the house, and he sees this kid that AJ got in the fight with. He sees his dad. Now the kids really don't know who Tony's is and what he does, but the kid's dad knows that he's in the mafia, obviously, and he knows that he's, he probably kills people, and he's holding a big axe, not for any violent reason. Tony also didn't know that the two kids got into a fight. But the dad gets scared. He freaks out. Why? Because of Tony's reputation, right? The reputation, though, in the community, why Tony within his organization may have a good reputation of being the leader and the boy wonder and the next kid to take over. In the community, he's seen as someone negative and a criminal. So we also have to look at our reputation in business. How is our reputation not just in our business, but how is it our reputation outside of our business? Everyone in our company may love us, but if we're not doing good things out in the community, or we're not supporting customers, or we're not doing things well, people aren't going to be as supportive. So that's something, once again, too, that's really important to remember as we're going through that and as that's happening. So we see Tony leave, and we know, too, in the last few scenes between Jackie dying, between the confrontation with Junior, and between the meeting with all the other bosses where they basically endorsed Tony to be the next leader, he's basically next up. He's next man up. He is going to get that big chance. And we see him come home, and you can tell it's kind of weighing on him, right? And he has kind of a mini panic attack in the kitchen. And it's really the stress of leadership. It's the stress of, hey, I have to be in charge, and he passes out. We've all seen this, right? Leadership, and you've heard the expression, it's lonely at the top. I don't know if it's so much lonely as it is the buck stops with you, right? That's a really big pressure. I recently did a training workshop for a company, and speaking to some of the leaders, I asked them, what's the hardest thing about being in a leadership role? Is they said, there's no one else to turn to if there's a problem. The buck kind of stops with you. Which I, can see that, and that's true. But that's why we talked about things like therapy and coaches and advisors. That's why Tony goes to Dr. Melfi. That's why Tony has Hesh and Silvio, who are kind of his consigliaries and mentors. That's why he had Jackie Aprile. So it's really important, too, why, yes, leadership is lonely. And this goes to what I talked about reputation. You also have to connect with people outside of your organization that are also within the community, because this helps build up your leadership as well and build up your leadership skills as you're going. So, Tony has this mini panic attack, and then of course we go back to the office. The pressure, back to Dr. Melfi's office. The pressure of leadership is really getting to him. Tony is really sort of struggling with the relationship with Junior too. Not only does he have to fight for this leadership position, he has to fight his own uncle for it. I mean, that's got to weigh on you a little bit, the family dynamics there. We learned too that Tony's dad passed away when he was young, so Junior was kind of probably like a second father to him, as Hesh has been. So really, really a tough struggle there. And he struggles with that. And Tony also talks about his desire to please his mother. And Dr. Melfi says a great line here, though. So it's still the communication of really the relationship of Tony and what he does, and the relationships. And this is where we see Dr. Melfi. There's a questionable ethical line, I think, that she has on like treating a mobster, if you will, right? Like, it's something she should be doing. Is she not doing? Is she enabling him to do good, or is she helping him to be a better family man? It's a debate for the ages. But one of the things she says, and I think it's a great line in the leadership perspective, is she says, Dr. Melfi says, give people the illusion of being in control. Give people the illusion of being in control. And she suggests this as a leadership strategy. So while I both agree and disagree with this in some ways, I think giving people the ability, and I wouldn't say the illusion, if you will, but sometimes people need to feel like they're in control and that they're not being overlooked too much, or they're not being micromanaged. So I wouldn't say it's illusion control as much as it is an empowerment. And I'm surprised to hear Dr. Melfi go here, right? Kind of the idea, and this is sort of talking about his mom and dealing with the nursing home situation, but Tony's now implying this to the situation with Uncle Junior as well. While this works in certain situations, she talks about it as being almost like a parenting technique with children. We do have to give people not the illusion that they are in control, but actually let them be in control. I kind of mentioned that workshop that I just did. The other thing I do when I work with people in an organization is I tell them, hey, how can you be empowered to be a leader in what you're doing? I think a lot of times we don't realize we're all in a leadership position. We're all in a position of leadership. I don't know if Chris realizes that. I don't know if someone, why they desire it and they don't think everyone thinks they're not in the top seat, and they really are. And I think one of the things that makes Tony a great leader, and the reason why everybody wanted him to take the top seat, is because he understood that everybody needs to feel in control and ownership of what they're doing and own their own place. So an interesting line there, the illusion of leadership, the illusion of control as a leadership strategy. But I think, and it's something we're going to dig into as we sort of move here throughout the end of the episode. All right, so next we go see Chris. He's kind of feeling better. He's getting back in the swing of things. He's going to make collections on one of his corners. And he goes to make the collection, and the guy's like, man, I heard you're back. It's good that you're back. And he says, man, I heard when you're out there, and this came up too a couple other times, I just didn't bring it up, that when Junior did take him out to the Meadowlands, we saw this, that Chris basically shit his pants, or you may have heard the expression shit the bed, right? So Chris here, who wants to be a mafioso guy, wants to be a big tough guy, basically when he was in probably the most tough guy situation, instead of trying to get out of it or be tough or go through it, he basically reverted to a childhood state and shit his pants. And because of that, everybody sees him as weak now. And Junior's crew knows that it's a sign of weakness as well. And they've gone over and they've taken over his business, right? And I think in business, we're all going to make mistakes. Things are going to go wrong. We're going to do things. We're going to shit the bed, if you will. But at the end of the day, we have to realize that we have to take accountability for those weaknesses. And Chris is going to say, what you said didn't happen. But if we don't try to fix the mistakes or acknowledge the mistakes or realize that we've done stuff wrong, people are going to come in and take over because people aren't going to want to do work with you anymore. And Chris obviously resolves this by beating the crap out of the guy and says that's not true. But this is really going to set the stage for Chris's anger, and really what needs to be done, and really sort of what's going to happen next. Next thing too, and we're going to get to a little bit about that situation with Chris, is AJ goes to show up for the fight. Now, if you remember, we started the episode with AJ and Tony playing video games, kind of bonding. AJ wondering where his dad is, and he said he was at his work, and him thinking nothing of it. He was at a trash compactor, got jammed up around sanitation. He thinks his dad's in the garbage business. AJ basically challenges this kid to a fight. Tony sees the kid's dad at the nursery, and now they're at the fight. So AJ walks up, and in the previous fight, AJ's shirt had got torn, and he told the kid, hey, you owe me money for this shirt. You owe me $40. And once again, we know in the mob, if you don't pay, you get whacked, right? So the kid comes up, AJ, all the kids are there cheering. They think a fight's going to happen. And the kid that AJ is supposed to fight takes $40. Jeremy Piacasa takes $40 out of his wallet and hands it over to AJ. He says, I'll fight you for it. I'll do this, whatever. The kid's like, no, just take it. I can't fight you. I won't fight you. And AJ's like, hey, man, you were scared. I knew the kid would be scared. And another kid in the crowd says, oh, yeah, he's real scared of you because he knows who AJ's dad is. So once again, we see this unveiling of who Tony is. So while AJ thinks he did something great and got respect and was able to do this, really everyone's still kind of looking down on him. And it's, really goes to show reputation, right? AJ's reputation, Chris's reputation, like I said, they all surround around Tony, or they're all kind of designed around Tony. Next, we got to Tony, and he's sitting, ironically, at the strip club. I think this is a hilarious scene. He's reading the book Dr. Melfi recommended on elder care. I just think it's funny. He's got a scotch and a cigar going, and he's reading a book on taking care of elderly people in the middle of a strip club. And the TV's on, and of course, while he's reading the book, he's not really into it. And he even told Dr. Melfi, I'm not a book guy, I zone out. And that's when the news comes on and it announces that Jackie dies. And remember what I said about Tony in the previous scene? We see the anger, denial, and acceptance again. He was kind of angry that Jackie was that sick. He said, what kind of God does this? When the news thing comes on, he gets really upset. He tells everybody to turn the music off, and he turns the news up, and he says, "Man, he told me he wouldn't go today. He's in denial. There's no way he's really dead." And then they all get ready to do a shot at kind of acceptance. Obviously, of course, Christopher, and we'll see this throughout the episodes of The Sopranos. Christopher, in all of his infinite wisdom and just bad timing, Chris has really bad timing. Comes running in and says, did you hear what happened to Jack? Did you hear what happened? He didn't say what happened to Jackie. He said, did you hear what happened? And everyone assumes Chris is talking about Jackie. And then Tony says, yeah. And he says, yeah. And he goes, and I went to Yo-Yo Mendez to collect. And he said, Junior took over his corner. And Tony just says, calm down. And Chris is like, no, I represent you out there. Your weakness. I got to question your leadership. You're not taking care of this Junior situation. There's nothing to think about. He goes, it's Scarface time, 2 guns under each arm. Say hello to my little friends. He's telling Tony, we got to come out there because I represent you out there on the streets, and I got to question your leadership if you're not going to go out and do this. And this pisses Tony off for multiple reasons. One, because Chris shouldn't even be doing that. Number two, because Jackie just died, and he even grabs Chris by the neck and says, you're lucky a man I just love died, or I kill you. And everyone around him is looking at Chris saying, like, man, you're just, you don't get it. And once again, like I said, Chris desires this leadership position, but he keeps making, just mistakes over and over and over again. So Tony knows now, too, that he has to nip these things in the bud. And I will say, one of the things that makes Tony a great leader is, excuse me, and you're going to see this throughout the show, is that he doesn't let problems linger. Tony does not let problems linger. He does not let them sit. He does not basically sort of sit there and say, hey, I'm going to just ignore this and see what happens. Tony always goes and deals with the problem as it happens. Jackie has died. We don't know who the boss of the family is. We know Junior wants it. We know everybody wants Tony to have it. He knows he needs to nip this problem in the bud. And basically all the other bosses told him previously, we'll do whatever you want, Tony. We'll do whatever you want, but we really want you. So he's trying to figure out how to solve this problem. So Tony heads to Junior, and he tells Junior, hey, you told me to come in heavy, so I came in heavy. And everyone in Junior's crew knows, man, this may go down, and they all basically back off. Tony sits down in front of Junior, and to both their credits as leaders and people who want to be leaders, they're somewhat calm in this situation. And Tony is, though, leading the conversation. And Tony is a great negotiator. Like I said, I love the way he negotiated with Slow-Mo, kind of downplaying things. He downplays things with Junior as well. He tells Junior, look, Jackie's passed. We need a leader. And he says there doesn't need to be confusion. And Junior agrees with them on all 3 points. So Tony, and this is what I love about, this is where I say so many great entrepreneurial lessons we learned in The Sopranos. He lays down the 3 points of the negotiation. We need a leader, problem. We don't want confusion, because that's also a problem. And the Sopranos have been waiting to take the reins for a long time. So it's problem, solution. Boom. This is the problems we need to solve. And this is a solution that a Soprano needs to take the reins, right? And Junior kind of agrees with that. Yep, it does. And Junior wants it to be him. So Tony, once again, and Junior thinks he's in for a hard negotiation. But Tony knows what he wants out of this. Tony knows what he wants to get. And then Tony tells Junior, I think it should be you. And Junior is basically at this point like, wow, like really, you want it to be me? And he's excited. And Junior thinks he won here. And he did, in a sense, right? Because Junior got what he wanted. He wants to be boss of the family. But Tony realizes a couple things I'm going to talk about in a second. And then they go and hug. And Tony whispers in Junior's ears, but I can't be seen to lose face. Because Tony says, I know I, quote unquote, lost. And Junior knows you, quote unquote, won. But I got to get something out of this. So he asks for Bloomfield and the Plumbers Union. Are basically the 2 things that he asked for. And Junior agrees to that because Tony knows how important reputation is in power. But why did Tony cave? Why didn't he take the big seat? Why didn't he just decide to become boss? And really, it was a smart move for the longevity of the organization. What Tony did here was make a decision that wasn't best for just Tony. Tony made a decision that was best for the organization. And here's the reason why. And we see this throughout the rest of the show. Junior is now boss of the family, which means the FBI and everybody that could hurt the business is going to be focused on Junior, not Tony. So that's number one. He's dealt with this FBI problem. We saw it in one of the early episodes where they come to the house and they search the house, and Meadow even kind of referenced that. This is really going to solve that problem. The second problem that it is going to solve is that Tony now has someone that he could sort of manipulate, if you will. He knows he can kind of control Junior, and even though he's in that main seat, he knows what he will get out of him. The third thing is, and I think the most important thing is that he got what he wanted. He got the financial part of it. He got Bloomfield and the Plumbers Union. That's where the money is, right? And he says, look, and we'll hear him talk about this at Jackie's funeral. That's where the money's at. So we really had he gave Junior what he wanted. He laid out the problems and the solution that he knew Junior was having. It's a great sales tactic, but ultimately he got what he wanted out of the deal. Tony's just an amazing negotiator, just really amazing in Bloomfield and the paving union. Just an amazing way that he sort of was able to get that. Next, we cut to AJ and Meadow and the brother and sister situation here. And Meadow is obviously wise beyond her years, and we see this throughout the program. Just really sharp. And we're gonna see the next episode is really gonna be focused a lot on Tony and Meadow. But AJ kind of comes in and says, "I'm really confused. I was supposed to fight this kid. I don't know what happened." And Meadow basically knows, and she basically reveals to AJ through this conversation who her dad is. That he is basically a mobster, right? It shows her the website and gives him the information. And AJ now learns who his dad really is. So we see this, all these transitions have happened, right? In the beginning of the episode, AJ really didn't know what Tony did. We had Jackie still alive. Junior and Tony had all this conflict. And now we cut to basically Tony in Dr. Melfi's office. And in the beginning, too, Tony didn't know who Dr. Melfi was. That was another key concept. Now he's got a little more insight because he got the report from Makazian. So now we cut to Tony in Dr. Melfi's office. And Tony's talking about the first time he saw a dead body. And we see Dr. Melfi really not paying attention. You remember, we started the show with Dr. Melfi being very focused on Tony and saying, I can't really reveal too much about myself. And Tony realizes she's not paying attention and says, hey, what's up? What's the matter? And boom, she right away tells the story of Tony and Makazian. Makazian and her boyfriend and what happened. And that he got beat up and everything that went on. And Tony knows exactly what happened. He knows that he was responsible for it. He knows why it happened. But it's interesting because the roles kind of shift now. Tony becomes the therapist and he's asking her questions. He almost pries it out of her. And he's apologizing for what he did. He feels guilt. Remember what I talked about? The reputation has a big impact on what happens and what goes on. And really, it's he realizes that he's kind of the cause of her stress and her anxiety. In the same way, he's the cause now of AJ's stress and anxiety, right? Because now AJ's got this hanging over his head. Meadow has it hanging. It's interesting. Meadow and Carmela both have it hanging over their head, but they deal with it much better. And we're going to dig into that in the next episode. They handle it way better than AJ and Tony handle even what Tony does, I think, in my opinion. But she gives in to Tony, and it's almost what he wanted. He got what he wanted now, which is odd, right? Because he had to have the investigator to learn more about Dr. Melfi and who she was. But now through this incident, she's opening up to him. So he kind of got what he needed twice, but he didn't do it the right way. So, I mean, he's really not getting the win here. So he got exactly what he wanted in the previous session with Dr. Melfi, but he got it in the wrong way, so it doesn't feel good now, right? So this is probably something that he would have loved in the last session where she would have opened up and shared something personal. And now she is opening up and sharing something personal, but she's doing it because he caused her pain, and he feels really guilty about that. So we cut to Jackie's funeral, which is basically the end of his road for his leadership, right? Jackie Aprile is now out. Junior is in as boss. Tony is kind of in the number two. And Silvio's questioning, but do you think this is a good idea? And keep in mind, when they were all in the strip club before eating the lobster, they all said Tony would be a great leader, but now they're questioning Tony a little bit. And Tony, he knows this is a good idea. He's confident in his decision. And that's what a great leader does, right? They're confident in their decision. They're confident in what they've done. They're confident in how things are. And they don't waver, right? Tony's like not saying like, oh, I don't know. Did I make the right decision? He's like, nope, this is the best thing. He goes, look at him. He's happy. He's content. And he reveals why it's good. Junior's happy, so we don't have to deal with Junior anymore. There's no conflict with him. We're in a better position financially than we've ever been because he was able to get Bloomfield in the paving union. And then more importantly, the third thing is he's a lightning rod for the FBI. I mean, Tony, like I said, he solves the three things, and now he's selling to his team why it's a good idea, and they all support him and they all buy in on it. So it's really neat to see sort of that leadership style from Tony. He's in power, and he knows how to have everyone trusting him and keep him trusting him. And how is he doing that? You can tell him. Like I said, I don't know if he bought the lobsters before for them when they were out eating, but they're going to make. He says we're going to make more money than we ever did, and we're going to do better financially than we did even under Jackie, who he loved and respected. So he knows that they're going to be happy because their pockets are going to be fat. They're going to be making a lot of money, but Tony is really the one that's firmly in charge of making all the decisions. But he's not taking the heat, which is really a great form of delegation. Tony, also a great delegator. We see, too, Tony talking to everybody, and it cuts to AJ kind of standing off there in the corner. He sees Tony And AJ is really putting it all together and has a realization of who Tony is. So we see Tony becoming who he is now. He's the boss of the mob family, and everyone now in his life realizes who he is. His daughter, his son. The secrets are out, right? The secrets are gone. And now Tony has a reputation to live up to, and he has sort of a standard that he has to live up to. So once again, great episode, really, really great episode. Season 1, episode 4, Meadowlands. So many great leadership lessons sort of revealed there. And, I talked about sort of projecting the image of control, which is interesting. So make sure you check out the key entrepreneurial message there in the show notes. I'm going to leave that down there. Once again, if you haven't subscribed to the show, please make sure that you do that. Links, once again, to supporters of the show, or Mando Cigars, Mafia Chronicles, who have shared some of the content out, which I really appreciate that. Hardcore Italians as well. My I Got a Guy shirt. They've also got some great Soprano type apparel on there. Make sure you check that out. HardcoreItalians.com. And once again, on the show notes too, I've now included a link to the HBO episode as well as the Talking Soprano episode. So make sure that you check that out. So I appreciate you tuning in. Excited to see you on the next episode, episode 5, College. I will see you on that episode. So for more great episodes like this, visit Sopranopreneur.com for more about me, MikeVicara.com, and I will see you on the next episode.